one long video, okay? Okay, so we're going to start with CMC joint, okay, of the thumb. And the CMC joint does flexion, it does extension, it does AB and adduction, okay? So, if I'm measuring the CMC joint, you need to make sure that you're back where the anatomical snuff box is. That's where the axis of rotation is, okay? That's where this CMC joint is. So, you're going to put the axis of rotation over the anatomical snuff box, okay? You're going to have both of your arms lined up together along that with the second metacarpal. Okay. Then you're going to ask your person to move their thumb out like that. When they move their thumb out, you're going to make sure that the stationary arm is parallel with the second digit. The movable arm is parallel with the first metacarpal. Okay. Okay. So that is CMC abduction. CMC adduction is starting the person, of course, in CMC adduction starts the person in CMC abduction. So you're going to measure their abduction, making sure that the axis of rotation is at the anatomical snuff box. The movable arm is lined up with the first metacarpal. The stationary arm is lined up with the second metacarpal. Okay? And then you'll ask them to move their thumb to their hand. When they do, they should zero out. And this is like the shoulder. When you do shoulder adduction, it won't go to true zero because it hits the finger. So as long as it comes all the way to the side, you can count that as 0. Okay? Okay. Now, CMC extension, you're going to have the axis, again, right over the CMC joint. Okay? This is going to be lined up with the second metacarpal. Okay, and remember, extension is this. Okay, so I'm going to ask her to move her thumb out to the side of her hand, like that. I'm going to keep the stationary arm lined up with the second metacarpal. Now I'm going to move the movable arm lined up with the first metacarpal. Okay. Now you're not going to get a good measurement if you put the axis of rotation too far up. It has to be back over the snuff box. Okay. Okay. Now flexion is coming across the palm this way. Okay, and actually I can do that again in the same position that we did abduction. However, I'm going to ask her to move her thumb across her palm that way. Okay, so the starting position is the same as abduction. Axis is going to be over the anatomical snuff box. This is going to be lined up. Both arms are going to be lined up with the second metacarpal. I'm going to ask her to bend her thumb across her palm, and when she does, I'm going to keep the stationary arm lined up with the first metacarpal. The movable arm is going to be lined up with the first metacarpal. Okay, and that's going to be her range.
Can you do that one again?
Yes. Okay, so she's starting here. Both arms are lined up with the second metacarpal. Now I'm going to ask her to move across her thumb, her palm. When she does, you can see that her metacarpal, her first metacarpal comes out a little bit. When it comes out, that's what you're measuring. You're going to keep this lined up.
Sorry.
That's good. Get the first metacarpal. Yeah, so, and remember, that's CMC. So on your test, you're going to have CMC flexion or extension. CMC flexion, CMC extension. We're not talking about MP flexion or extension. or MP flexion or extension. Okay. Okay. So now, if we were to now we go on to the next joint, which is MP flexion and extension. Okay. That's why we have these goniometers. This is easy. Okay. So what I do is you're going to ask the person to bend their thumb down. You're going to okay. You're going to put this over the metacarpal, this over her phalange, and that's your range of motion. Okay. The same thing with her IP joint. Remember, there's only one IP joint. So if I ask her to bend her thumb down again, like that, I just put one over her proximal phalange, one over her distal phalange, and that's her range of motion.
Where do you get the reading from?
Oh, it's this. It's what the line is lined up to.
Okay.
So, okay. So, and then extension is going to be the same thing. If I'm going to start her flexed, I'm going to take the measurement. Okay, and then I'm going to ask her to extend her thumb out. Okay, and then she will go into. She's not going to go into hyperextension of her MP, but she will go into hyperextension of her IP. But as long as she's at 0, it's okay. Okay? So she's going to start here. And then she's going to extend her thumb. And then I'm just going to place that over the joint and make sure that's flat. But like I said, the IP joint, and you're going to do the same thing with IP flexion. She's going to start into extension, right? And then she's going to extend that, and then she's actually going to go into hyperextension. So this actually will measure hyperextension as well. Okay? So, now, the next thing that we measure is on the fingers. We're going to measure MP flexion. So you're going to have her make a fist, and all you do is you take your goniometer, and actually it usually works better like this because this part is too long to fit over the wrist. So you just hold it over her joints like this, making sure that each part is flush. And you still take the measurement by where it lines up with the line. Okay? So then extension, you said what?
You have a measurement for every one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then extension is the same thing. We're starting... Okay. The extension is the same thing. We're going to measure her starting out in flexion, and we're going to ask her to to straighten her hand out, and she should be at 0. Okay, but she can hyperextend at her MPs. Okay, in fact, your book says there's about probably like I think 10 degrees of hyperextension. Go ahead and extend. Okay, so she can hyperextend some. Okay.
So on the test, if we get MP flexion, we need to give you 4 readings.
Yeah.
So you'll make us measure 4 different times during our practical.
Yeah, it's not very hard though.
I was
Just-
just
I just wanna
asking
make
if
sure.
we
All of
just
them should
pick
be the
one
same
and
all the way
do it, or if
across.
you want us to do all 4.
I'll stop you once I
Okay.
know
Measure
that
Holly.
you know what you're doing. So, okay. So then we are on the PIP joints, right? So you're gonna go this way. So if I have her here, I'm going to line it up like that. 1, 2, 3. Now, if I'm a hand therapist and I only see difficulties with one digit, I'm really just going to document the deficit. But so okay. With extension is the same thing. I'm going to measure her in flexion first and ask her to extend her finger, and she should be at 0. Okay. And you can zero it out, but you can also see if it's 0. But for your test, you guys should be zeroing it out. Okay. The next thing is DIP flexion here. So I'm going to ask her to just bend the tips of her fingers like that, because you need to be able to get, if she made a full fist, of course you wouldn't be able to get to the DIPs. So you have to ask her to do this. Okay, so I'm going to go here, 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 and then there. Okay, while I'm checking the measurements. Extension is going to start the same way. I'm going to start her inflection. Go ahead. Okay, I'm going to start her here. Ask her to extend her fingers. Okay, and now I'm going to take that measurement. Okay, that should be 0. Now, AB and AD deduction. Okay, can you move your one finger out? Okay. So, as you can tell, that AB and AD deduction is occurring around her MP joint, right? So, it's really hard if you do this to line this up, the stationary arm up with anything, so you can keep the arms together like this. Put it right over the MP joint you're testing, okay? And you're going to just keep this lined up parallel. You're going to keep the stationary arm lined up or parallel with her other digits. You're going to ask her to move her finger away from her hand, and then you're going to line this up with her finger. Okay? Making sure this one is staying parallel with her other digits. Okay? That's AB deduction, and for AD deduction, I'm going to start measuring here. Okay, and then I'm going to ask her to bring her finger back to her hand. Make sure it's 0. The only, if it goes back to her fingers, it's going to automatically be 0. If she can bring her fingers all the way together. Okay. Now remember, the third digit only AB ducts. The AB ducts to the right, it AB ducts to the left. It does not AD duct. Okay, so when I do AB duction, I'll measure AB duction twice for the middle finger. Do you guys have any questions about the range of motion of the digit?